Tell me more about a trader.
Over the last 10 years, we have seen several conflicts like 2014, then the COVID shock, 2019, 22, and now the recent conflict. Most of these companies want to bring investments into the country. Food, feed, and fuel has to be looked in tandem as one complex. No doubt the country has to move towards energy and be ready to be able to cater to the current geopolitics situation.
Hi, and welcome to Samavesh, monthly podcast series by Arcus Policy Research. In our today's episode, I'm extremely honored to welcome Garima Jain, who's not just a globally renowned agriculture commodity trader, but is now a fellow entrepreneur. Thank you, Garima, for joining. So just to open the conversation, walk us through your journey till today, please.
Thank you, Shweta. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. And I joined agriculture about 2 decades back, so I have seen how things have transformed 2 decades back. So when I started working in this sector, agriculture was still shaping up, very fragmented. And I think travel and security were a different kind of a concern. So not that India was unsafe, but when I used to travel, I used to be very conscious of going to rural segments of the country. That said, I still remember, just to come up with a story, I still remember when I was staying in a PG and consulting and IT sectors were picking up 2 decades back, my friends used to talk about going to Kansas while I was going to Kota. My friends used to talk about going to Illinois while I would go to Itarsi. So the food and agriculture sector has evolved in the last 20 years. And I had the opportunity to go to the rural segments of the country, look at the problems, the supply chain fragmentation that is in the country. I traveled to a lot of rural parts in India, understood the basic challenges and problems that this segment faces. The second thing is about communication. When I was working, I would talk to somebody sitting in a local mandi to a global trader. So learning the local parlance of this sector was very important. So when you speak to somebody sitting in the mandi, you don't talk about parity. You talk about padta. You talk about bardana. You talk about sukli. You talk about how the entire system will work. You talk about bilti. So communication in its own sense became very important. 2 decades far, India is more evolved. Travel is better, securities are good, and technology is playing a key role. From a sector which was very gender biased, I think today the female participation in the sector is encouraging, is very good. India is a country which has always had female goddesses. So Indian agriculture goddess is Annapurna. The goddess of wealth is Lakshmi. The goddess of knowledge is Saraswati. So I think the sector and the female participation is very encouraging and is going to play its own role.
How lovely. It's so encouraging for it to come from you. So tell me more about a trader. A trader usually in an agricultural value chain is looked upon as that villain who would extract value from the farmer and is usually blamed to speculate on the price, where even the consumer suffers. How do you think that has changed over time, if it has?
So the role of trade cannot be undermined. Trade is something that connects the producer country to a consumption sector and brings the right value of the produce to the consumer, brings the right quality at the right location. We have seen global food systems evolving. We have seen, for example, South America was a big producer. It was the role of the trade to bring it to the consumer, and it thrived. So similarly, a trader plays a role of one, integrating this market by bringing the produce to the consumer. Second, a trader understands and studies multiple variables in this market, starting from macroeconomics, weather, forex, logistics, supply chain, geopolitics, and all these variables is converted into an analysis. And that's when trader is able to have a sense of how the supply and demands are evolving and is able to rightly position this market in a manner that these variables are completely integrated into price discovery mechanisms.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I'm going to poke you one more. So, what according to to you is what the governments don't know, but the traders know? So, is there a black box where you think that the governments are probably lesser aware of dynamics which traders understand?
I think one is the inherent role of the trade that integrates this market from the producer to the consumer. So, trading is not about buying or selling. Trading is not just about profit making. Trade is about connecting these markets. One, trade is about converting an idea, analysis into execution and make sense out of it. And then more importantly, trade is able to, like I mentioned, integrate all these variables to make sense out of it. So I think to take the entire produce of the country to the right market is where trading becomes very important. And its analysis throws light on what is going to happen, brings about predictive analysis into action, brings about various weather variabilities into action. So to me, trading or trader is not about profit steering only, but about proper risk management, which is what makes it a very robust system, which is what the country needs today.
Brilliant. So, in a way, what you're trying to say is that the governments usually are looking back and probably looking at the current situation, whereas a trader looks at future, looks at where we are at the moment, looks at crop balance sheets, looks at forex, looks at global balance sheets. Would that be correct to say?
Absolutely. And let us understand the basics. What is agriculture? Agriculture is commercialization of photosynthesis. What is a commodity? It is an undifferentiated product. And what is a price? A price is where S&D matches. You speak about future market. Future market enables multiple variables to come together and shift the curve to a point where S&D matches. So it plays its own role in price discovery, in risk management, and in efficient allocation of the resources to put it to the best use.
Right. So, Garima, tell me something about how does the global commodity world look at India agriculture?
So India is at the core of global agriculture system. The world knows India's success story. Our farmers have done a fantastic job. Our governments have done a fantastic job in bringing the country to a food security position. In 1960s, we used to produce only about 10 million tons of wheat and consistently look at the global world to feed the country. We have gone through several droughts and several famines. Fortunately, we have come to a level wherein our food security is sufficient, is good. Again, thanks to the farmers of the country. So India has been seen as a success story. We have moved from a food deficient country to a food sufficient country. Now we stand at an inflection point. From till now, we have seen only the supply side of the story. We are standing at a juncture where Indian demand will surprise the world. If we look at examples in Southeast Asia, any geography, any economy, when it grows, whenever the GDP grows, the protein consumption increases, the consumption pattern changes. If you look at China, 2007, India and China were at the same per capita income around $2,500. Look at how the consumption patterns in China have increased, changed from 20-30 million tons of soya bean to 100 million tons of soya bean is an exponential demand curve change of the geography. So now the world is looking at India, how the food and agriculture sector will evolve from 4 trillion economy to a 25 trillion economy is going to see massive changes in the food and agriculture demand. Indian consumer is going to spend in absolute terms more on food. And more importantly, in India, 80% of the marginal section depends on food. So the government also has to take care of food inflation. So far, we've been doing a very good job in ensuring that the food reaches to the last person in the country via government distribution schemes. And I feel that to take care of the poorer section of the society becomes a critical part, because when you provide food to a poor person, he takes care of the family. But when he has to spend more on food, he spends less on education and health. And that's when the economy suffers. So, from that context, I feel that the world is looking at India, the world is looking at India's growth, Indian consumer, how we are becoming a powerhouse. And I can only say that the times are very exciting ahead.
Lovely. The flip side, whenever we study agricultural policy, we see that there is a consumer bias in the government policies, because of which there has been a flip-flop of sometimes we introduce export restrictions, we usually have changing import duties. How does the global commodity world, or even yourself as a global commodity trader, look at these changing and somewhere ad hoc agricultural trade policies? Do they damage as much we reckon that they do? Or are the global countries aligned with the fact that the government positions would be as fluctuating?
So, Shweta, this is an extremely interesting question, because for one, Government of India has to take care of the farmer and the consumer. So our entire policies are designed in a manner to have the right balance between the farmer and the consumer, and is very important. For example, we just spoke about how to take care of the food inflation, and we cannot have a rising food inflation in a country which is still growing. At the same time, we have to ensure that Indian farmer receives its best value. For that, what is needed is, of course, a lot of efforts towards market orientation and standardization and quality of the produce. But the second important point for all of us to understand, including the government, is that there is a reputational value to a reliable trade partner. Today, India stands at a juncture wherein we are completely integrated with the global food systems. There are areas where we will be dependent on the world to become our food supply chain partners. We are one of the largest consumers of pulses, let's say oil seeds, or moving towards a protein economy, for which we will need globally our supply centers. So, whenever there are restrictions and policies, so may be important from our country's standpoint, but the point is that needs to go out timely. If a farmer in Canada is planting pulses for India, the price signal needs to go at the right time. If we are exporting something, we need to capture our brand value in a proper manner. So, for example, there is a brand India value attached to spices, to millets, to organic food, and I think that needs to be promoted in the right manner. So, consistent policy, a robust policy framework is required. And the significant point here is the MIS, the data, the supply side information. Today, we do third or fourth advance estimates for a crop which has come an year back. The data systems have to be on real-time basis. The world works on real-time data. Every month there are releases from developed economies on how much they are producing. So our production numbers have to be on real-time basis and not subsequently. I think that information will help India not to be in the black box, but to be an efficient supply chain partner and a participant in the global agriculture system, despite of the fact that we have 1.4 billion population to feed.
Wonderful. So the way I see it is, what you're saying is that the government policies have been ad hoc, but they're essentially reacting to, say, a food security palpable threat in a country. However, if there were intelligence systems in place, such ad hocness may be able to they are addressed better, and we'll have more predictability in our government policies, and therefore the value chains and the traders and everybody in the value chain benefits.
Absolutely.
Would that be correct?
100%. And The crux is that the farmer will be able to get the right value, the maximum value benefit from the supply chain.
So, if I were to just put it together, so not just climate change, but policy fluctuations and unpredictability is another elephant in the room that affects global value chains.
100%. And the biggest elephant today is geopolitics. Yeah. The global S&Ds work in a is the geopolitics. The global S&D is at the center of geopolitics. There is always, we have seen, fight over the most productive land in the world. So we have seen historically a lot of revolutions. If we look behind, there was an Arab Spring, which was because of the bread riot. Big empires like Roman empires have fallen because of the bread. USSR, the core issue was non-payment of food. And why go far? Over the last 10 years, we have seen several conflicts like 2014, then the COVID shock, 2019, 22, and now the recent conflict. So geopolitics becomes the center of everything. And therefore, India has to move from fragmentation to integration to be able to have these resilient systems to take care of geopolitics systems.
Wonderful. So, just pivoting the conversation, what are the signals that you look at when you are taking positions on different agricultural commodities globally? Great. So, Garima, now let's talk about how a global commodity trader takes positions. So tell us more about it, because we've got our view as researchers, because we've been undertaking market intelligence for selected agricultural commodities, and it's not easy. There is a crop S&D that you have to look at. There are forex reserves that you look at. Then globally, countries are becoming more protectionist. So those are the forces that talks about how reserves could actually be playing geopolitically. And then there are swan, gray and black swan events like the geopolitical crisis. What indicators does a trader like yourself look at when taking positions?
So multiple factors. As a trader, one has to take care of all the macroeconomics, geopolitics, what can change, how the input crisis or evolution is happening, how the oil is panning out, forex exposures, logistics, supply chain. And since you mentioned that there is a protectionism, yes, the world is moving towards more food secure, the governments are getting more protectionist, the regionalism is picking up. And when that happens, price is not the only key indicator. Supply chains have to be robust, because when you are sitting in a consumption geography, you have to ensure that you have ample supplies of what you are eating. The second important point here is that the world is one place, and it has to be completely integrated on how the food systems in India are, which means what? Which means that we have to take our produce and provide ample access to the market, to the farmers, so that a farmer is able to get minimum 50 to 60% of what the consumer pays across all the diversified commodities. Today, maybe the farmer realizes only about 10 to 20% of what the consumer pays, and that certainly needs to go higher.
So when you look at a country, how exactly would you know that in some years from today, this country has enough systems or invisible systems in place that will become an agricultural trade hub?
It's not a one-day story. I think it is a continuous improvisation in the process. So if we look at the Indian commodity segment, or the global food systems, it is becoming more complex, more intertwined, and horizontally and vertically linked. In such a scenario, the real-time data helps. That is number one. Secondly, you have to work in various scenarios of what can change, because things are changing at a very fast pace. Number three, food security and nutrition security becomes paramount to our geography. Today, we are good on wheat and rice, but how we are going to span out on diversified pace of all the other commodities, that becomes very important. So 3 critical factors. One, we have to be climate change ready, which means that whether today the government is investing in R&D, in seeds, if we see due to global warming, we have seen more production because more area, snow-covered area has come into production. So global supplies have increased. So we have had new production center. If you look inwardly at India, our winters are becoming shorter. Temperatures are changing. So as a geography, as a country, we need to have ample investment in drought-resistant varieties, heat-resistant varieties. More importantly, an efficient market system so that the seeds reach to the farmers and they're able to have this climate weather variability in control. I think that is going to become extremely important in the times to come.
So it is the readiness of a country to preempt what challenges climate, for example, would be throwing at us, and how ready a country is. So that's one variable that you look at. Then you also look at how the consumption and the possible pipeline of supply potential in the country is, to which you're saying that you're looking at the research pipeline of seeds and other systems supporting it.
Absolutely, Shweta, you summed it up quite well. And that's exactly the point, that how much the investments are going into R&D, into having efficient data systems, into infrastructure, how much we are investing in efficient storage systems, what kind of infrastructure we are bringing to the farmers, to the traders, and to the processors, how our processing systems are being evolved. For example, we have integrated all the custom ports, which is a good step. And such infrastructural improvements and changes will only reduce the cost and have a good market access for everyone.
So tell me something. Traders, large giants, global trading companies have existed in the country for more than 2 decades and thriving. But we don't see much investments by these global traders in the country. Is the problem with the global environment, or do you assess that there are problems within the country that needs some solution?
Well, that's a very touchy question. Yes, companies have existed. They will continue to do so. Importantly, most of these companies want to bring investments into the country. I think somewhere it falls between on where to invest, how to invest, and how to get the best government support in the investments. So if we don't have a free private trade, the country suffers on investments. Lack of investments mean that you will take 2 steps forward but 1 step backward. So I think that struggles have remained. Things are improving for better. Number 2 is that because the commodity markets in India lack future market without any direction, so a lot of traders run high risks on taking cash positions. If we look across big consumer markets globally, for example, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Philippines, they have a future benchmarking system, and usually the cash prices are at a premium or a discount to the future benchmarking prices, something which we lack in the country. And I think that therefore the trader has to run a higher risk without getting a proper price direction.
How wonderful. We've just at Arcus recently released a report where in our own limited way, we celebrated that it's been 5 years since the future commodity trading of key agriculture commodities have been banned. And we've analytically seen that banning a future trade in an agri-commodity does not reduce the volatility in the prices or the peaks of the prices that they achieve, which are essentially a function of fundamentals of a commodity.
Absolutely.
And if it's an imported commodity, also fundamentals of the global balance sheet. So what you're saying is that one of the things that country suffers at the moment is that we do not have access to a credible future assessment of a price of a commodity. Absolutely. So we've been talking about it, how when the government releases MSP, it is before the farmer sows. but there is no other alternate market that tells a farmer what the price of, say, maize would be 3 months from now. So that, you think, also adversely affects the traders.
See, in globally, the future market was designed for a large farmer, so they are able to hedge. Unfortunately, in India, we are more fragmented, and we have small farmers, and therefore the agriculture future system in the country has not been evolved. Having said that, like I mentioned, we stand at a point wherein Indian agriculture needs a robust future price mechanism for it to thrive, survive, and make the best out of it.
I want to focus on our Viksit Bharat vision for 2047. How does a global trader like yourself see our vision? Are we unambitious? Are we targeting right? Is there more we can do?
We are very ambitious. There is a lot that we can do. And I can only say that Viksit Bharat vision cannot be achieved unless we have Viksit agriculture. And that is the starting point for all of us.
So, do you think that as a trader today, we are geared up for achieving surpluses in commodities like pulses, in oil seeds by 2047, or are there any palpable threats you see even in our vision and its design of it today?
Shweta, no doubt it is a tall task. The way Indian consumer is becoming demanding and the food consumption patterns in the country is changing. That remains the core of the big change. The demand revolution is going to surprise all of us. So from food security, the journey to nutrition security needs a lot to improve upon. Our land masses are limited. We have to make the best use of the land. The climate changes are hounding us. Our yields in some of the commodities are on the lower side if we compare to the global averages. A lot of work needs to be done there.
Lovely. Let's put this together in a matrix of SWOT: strength, weakness, opportunity, threat. Let's look at our strengths and weaknesses today.
So Indian agriculture system has been very strong. The best part is that during our ancient times, since old times, India has been focused on sustainable agriculture. So this is not something that we need to learn now. The world needs to learn from India. Inherently, as a country, we have been doing sustainable agriculture. The farmers of the country take 2 or 3 crops, make the best use of the land that is available. Just that at this point in time, we need an impetus, a push in improving yields, in getting better seeds, in improving our infrastructure, so that we are able to bring back our strengths in the agriculture to future times.
Lovely. So let's look at the OT, the opportunities and threats.
Humongous opportunities. I think going forth, the landscape is huge. So there will be a value of quality assurances. There will be a value of in getting graded material. If you look at the global systems, on any produce, the graded quality is pretty much defined. So when we go and buy a certain variety of a produce, we know what we are buying because the specifications are clearly defined. Something that is lacking in India, everything is not generalized. So efficient grading systems for better quality assurances need to come. The third is that there will be a value of carbon efficient systems, traceability, IP origin, organic farming, and India is standing right there to make the best use out of it. To me, that is the future. Not to undermine the technology in agriculture, it is going to play a huge part. So digital intervention, improvisation in agriculture is the future. We have to move to a system or reach a point wherein every farmer has a personalized digital advisory to be able to guide on how they can make the best use of their land.
Wonderful. Threats. I won't let you go without that. So where do you think are threats where much of this could fall apart?
So 3 things related to threats. One is the entire geopolitics, how it is changing and at a very fast pace. Second is the weather. Again, we have to be very conscious of how the weather systems are changing, and to be able to have data-driven GIS systems in place so that we know the weather advisory risks that are there. And the third is efficient policy making, so that the market gets the right direction, right signals at the right time, and we all of us stand together, all the stakeholders, the farmers, the processors, the traders, the government, the exporters, the importers. Only then we will have a resilient agriculture supply chain.
Absolutely. I'm just going to add a point you mentioned before, where you said we also need R&D and extension systems to come up. And unless there is a pipeline of technology, much of the yield benefits and the growth we are hoping for may not come about, and this is the right time. Brilliant. Last, I won't let you go before you told us about 2026. There is a fertilizer crisis we are witnessing at the moment. The geopolitical risks globally continue to haunt, and we are awaiting some silver lining, though there is anticipation sooner things should stabilize. This would be, in all likelihood, a super El Nino year. El Ninos are associated with not so good things with our country. How are you viewing 2026 as an agri-trader? What are you buying? What are you selling? Where are the risks?
No doubt, El Nino is an inherent risk to the country. So, two important points. One is that El Nino is an event that tends to stay longer. So, we have to see not only 2026, but 2027 in tandem to the risks that are underlying. Number two is it raises potential threat to multiple crops. For example, there can be a delayed sowing of paddy. There will be higher irrigation demand. There will be effects on production of sugarcane, pulses, soybean. So the oilseed segment needs to be taken care of. So in this scenario, I think if the government is ready with the proper buffer stocks, which we have. So for example, in wheat, today we have 3 times of the buffer requirement. In rice, we have 5 times. So food part is taken care of. To me, the challenge lies in diversified crops. And since nutrition and protein is the underlying need of the hour, I think that can suffer a bit due to deficient rainfall. Third important part is that we have to look at the spatial distribution of rainfall, which place get how much rains to be able to have the right course of direction for these 2 upcoming years.
This is potent. So what you're saying is not just 2026, there will be a contagion or a follow-on spillover effect even on 2027. You anticipate Kharif crops are likely to suffer, and some of it would also affect the Rabi. Is that what you're anticipating?
Absolutely. And it changes the entire dynamics of the food feed fuel complex that needs to have the right balance, given that we want to be energy independent, given that we are a food country and we are rising on feed. The sector is growing by not less than 6 to 8%.
That just brings me, and I have to get your input on this, the energy economy, and that will be my last question. How are you foreseeing, or how is the globe understanding where increasing quantities of rice and maize by India are and would be diverted towards producing ethanol?
Shweta, this is one of the most important part of the Indian agriculture system today. Food, feed and fuel has to be looked in tandem as one complex. No doubt the country has to move towards energy and be ready to be able to cater to the current geopolitics situation. Whenever the feed sector grows, which it is growing today, owing to the changing consumption patterns in the country, it also has an impact on food. So the grain inclusion in feed will also increase. So the entire complex is undergoing a transformation. And as a country, we have to be ready, being very mindful of the fact that we have 1.4 billion population to feed and 1.7 billion population to feed by 2050.
So I'm nudging you to say this, but is the global world expecting us to maybe become importers of maize in some time?
Well, that depends on multiple factors. Import of maize is not something new. We've been doing that in the past. And there are years when we have imported from multiple exporting geographies. So, yes, I think that is going to happen given the way we are consuming. And not only maize, we will be continuous importers of multiple commodities. Of course, that is subject to how the entire weather systems span out, how quickly we are able to increase the yields in the country, how are we able to divert our lands maybe from rice to maize and other crops in a manner so that we have an efficient food and nutrition system in the country.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I think this has been an exceptional learning podcast even for me. So thank you very much. Clearly, food security at the moment is not just about what we produce. It is about building the systems of how we produce it, how we move it, how we grade it, how we store it and transport it, and then adapt to the changing dynamics. So thank you. Thank you, Garima. It's been a wonderful discussion. Thank you very much.